All right, y'all. Welcome back to From the Weeds to the Clouds, where we zoom out, tune in, and try to make sense of this wild ride we're all on as leaders, as creators, as human beings. I'm Michael Krefman here with my co-host Michael Peterson, and today
Hello.
we're taking this one deeper. Of course, we're talking weed, but not just the industry side. We're not getting lost in SKUs or operations. We're going deeper than the roots, grounded all the way to the core, and we're going higher than strategy, beyond market trends, beyond business plans, all the way up to the cosmos. So we're talking cannabis and consciousness, the inner side of the plant, the frequency, the intention, the energy behind it all, not just how we buy, sell, and consume, but how we relate to it, how it shows up in our evolution, spiritually, psychologically, energetically. And today we're joined by someone who's been a part of my evolution, not just as a guest, but as a close friend and a true mirror. Sabo Shen is one of those rare humans who doesn't just talk evolution; he embodies it. You might know Sabo as the founder of Vape Exhale, an award winning vaporizer that helped shape the modern cannabis experience. But that was just chapter one. What's more powerful is the shift he made from building cutting edge hardware to channeling divine presence, from scaling companies to helping people scale consciousness. Today, Sabo works with energy, mindset, and source. He teaches others to how to remember who they are. He helps leaders in cannabis and beyond drop out of ego loops and back into alignment. He's not just a coach or a creator. He's someone living in resonance with the frequency of the greater self. And I say this personally, Sabo's helped me access more clarity, more stillness, and more intention in how I move through life. So whether you're here for the tech, the transformation, or you're just trying to feel a little more whole, this one's for you. Sabo, welcome to the clouds, brother. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for that intro. And, it's always funny, like hearing an intro of yourself. I felt my body actually contracting, like, dude, I'm just some regular guy that, like, hangs out with my chickens, takes my kids to jujitsu class. And, I'm hearing all these, like, really wonderful things about myself. And, I often just really think of myself as a regular person that just had, the fortunate benefit of bumping into the right mentors or people that could like crack me open and really be open to things outside of my five senses. And I think in Asian culture, there's like humility is like really built in. Like your parents could brag about you, which Asian parents love to do, but you yourself should be extremely humble. And one of the things that I felt was important to communicate was that, on my podcast, when I introduce people, I do an introduction like you just did for me, Kref. I did my research. I make sure I know like all the positive things that the people do. And usually what happens is like I see them shrink afterwards. They're like, oh, that's not me, just like super humble, like it was my team. And in many ways, like when I see that in other people, I'm like, man, why can't you just receive that compliment and just like when someone's trying to give you a gift and you don't receive it, you kind of like just block that energetic flow, and
So true.
there is something to receiving something that someone else wants to give. So I just really wanted to thank you for that introduction, and to also let people know like everything that Kref said about me, these aren't like innate gifts or skills like I was born with. These are all things that people can cultivate. I myself was an atheist for the first 44 years of my life until I started having transcendent experiences without psychedelics. And that's what kind of like opened me up to like, wow, these higher frequential realms that you access through psychedelics are completely accessible if you just know the right protocol. It's just like if you want to lose weight, if you understand, more calories in than calories out, it's not going to work. If someone gives you like the framework and the rule book for how to expand your consciousness, then it's absolutely something within all of us.
Yeah, 100%. I don't say those words just as a script from doing, research. We've known each other for some time now, and have had some deep interpersonal interactions. So it's not just some empty compliments there, and those words are really true and from the heart. So no, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today, and to share some light and love with all of our, whoever's able to tune in as well. I've been a big fan and of your content, whether those are your shorts or your meditation and breath work videos, or your YouTube content, or your podcasts. And I think one of your recent ones that I had seen was a short that then led me to a longer video around spiral dynamics, and that was a topic that I found fascinating and somewhat familiar with, but not in that terminology. So I wanted to dive in a little bit more from a framework level around spiral dynamics. So, like for people who aren't familiar
I'm not
with,
familiar.
okay, so yeah, for MP, like from say survival states to complex unity and integration, just like I know this has been foundational for you, so maybe set the stage there for MP, and even to re-level me with spiral dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll do my best to keep it succinct because that 1 hour video that I made was condensing about 30 hours worth of materials. But
Yeah.
if you just think about models in general, right? Models are like frameworks to help you better understand any type of topic. But just like any models, there's always going to be outliers. So um, I found like this was maybe one of the most accurate models that can give you an insight into how the human psyche and human consciousness develops. And what I love about spiral dynamics is that it transcends age, race, culture, socioeconomics, gender, sexual preferences. It applies to the individual, it applies to a company, it applies to a county, it applies to the state, it applies globally. And I would also argue it applies universally as well, into the galaxies and into the cosmos. But the idea is that at every stage of your development, you have different core values, and you also learn about yourself by focusing on yourself or by focusing on other people. And there's 8 stages in spiral dynamics, and you alternate between focusing on yourself and focusing on other people. So you may have, I see MP nodding his head. You
Yeah.
may have just observed in your own lifetime, like, yeah, there were periods where it was really about me finding out my identity. And then there were other periods where you're like, hey, I want to serve and help other people, and then kind of learn about yourself by helping other people. And the reason why spiral dynamics is so important to me to disseminate this information is that I believe, just like Maslow's hierarchy,
Yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy didn't become popular till about 30 years after Maslow passed. Is I believe in 20 to 30 years, just like everyone understands Maslow's hierarchy, we will understand spiral dynamics. And just like I don't expect my kid to understand calculus, I don't expect other people at different stages of consciousness to be open to like some of these things that I'm talking about, right? Like it'll take too long to go through all 8 stages, but 2 stages that are pretty important to talk about is stage 5 is the achiever stage. And in the achiever stage, your self-worth, your self-esteem, your value to society is how much you can achieve. And so the biggest influencers, the people that we look up to, the people in positions of power are all at stage 5 out of 8 stages, right? And so I would say the vast majority of first world countries are stage 5 countries where it's all about GDP, about revenue, about like what's your net margins, like all of that stuff. And so everything that you feel internally is based on what is going on in the external world. And then that's stage 5, the achiever stage. Stage 6 is the inner reflection stage. And you start realizing that nothing from the outside, no amount of awards, no amount of adulations, no amount of of how big your asset portfolio is if you're a nervous, anxious person, like those things will not cure your anxiety and nervousness. That has to come from within. Okay, so examples of stage 5, the achiever stage: Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, any owner operator in the cannabis space falls into that category. Stage 6, stage 6 would be like the hippie selling crystals at the beach boardwalk, And so when I primarily coach what I call professional overachievers, so senior level executives or C-level executives, and when I tell them this, they're always in denial. Like the guy selling crystals, the guy with the dreads, the guy with the sandals, he has a higher level of consciousness than me. I can't believe it, And I go, well, that's because you're stage 5. You're measuring your self worth based on external things, But if you just kind of like my favorite kind of joke to tell is, yeah, just go Google billionaires and then hit images and see how many smiling photos you see. No, it's all dudes just like stone faced, um, don't look like they have like a single bit of joy in their life, tweeting at people that are like gamers that they're pieces of shit because, they're gaming against them. Yeah, that's for Elon Musk. But yeah, so what I always try to explain to them is there's 8 stages. Stage 5 is barely past the 50% point, barely past the 50% point. So for me, understanding this model made me realize that, yeah, this is why I've exited 6 companies and never felt fulfillment. It was like, I was like, I need this 7th company. I need this 8th company to exit. And I realized, and that's why I just moved out of the Bay Area to live on a farm, was like the Bay Area is just so much external noise, everyone chasing the shiny object. And I knew in order for me to evolve, in order for me to expand, I needed to get quiet, to be by myself. And after 3 years of literally being by myself, I probably saw like 4 or 5 people a week, for those 4 years. And that was just when I was dropping my kids off at school. Was that after I had enough time to reflect internally about who I am, get back into alignment, then the mission was clear. Come back to the cannabis industry, share this information, and help everyone who has been grinding, hustling, and suffering realize there's a better way, to have this lived experience. And when you are in a higher frequential, higher vibrational rate, your vibe attracts your tribe, and then you start attracting other people that are in this higher resonance. And I like to say that, there's victim consciousness and there's creator consciousness. And when you're in victim consciousness, it is everything externally happening. The hemp bill, it's hard to raise money. It's this, that, or the other, versus getting to a place where you have 100% accountability for what
Ownership.
you're doing. Yep. And how you're showing up. And then you could get back into, I like to call it God mode, but I know the word God like triggers some people. So I just call it creator mode. And you've seen all the things that I've created. It's not just content, it's not just posts, but it's like real tangible stuff that is, in my opinion, going to change the way that people consume cannabis. And I believe that, I had shared with you, Kref, is that, and actually this is part and parcel to MP, is like if you accomplish something big in life, you could say the stupidest shit and someone will be able to extrapolate like some wisdom out of it. If you are like, if you are like a bud tender and people don't perceive that you've done something big, you could be saying the most brilliant stuff and like people won't be listening. So to me, it's like super important to like really illuminate like the fact that this is how like people pay attention. So part one is I solve the 510 hardware issue in our industry. Once I solve that and people understand, like, yeah, this guy got all of his ideas not by reading MJ BizCon, not by like combing the internet, not by typing a prompt into Chat GPT, but getting into deep, quiet meditation and allowing these ideas to just come to me and then producing them and manifesting them into reality.
That's incredible, and so much there. I think that one of the things you mentioned was that the spiral dynamics is not just applicable to the individual, but to organizations, entire maybe cultures or countries. When you think about the cannabis industry, is there um, a certain level or color that the the industry is operating on right now, and where, you mentioned individuals, owners, operators on a five. What about the industry as a whole? Where are we right now? Where do we need to go, or where should we aspire to be? Or is that not something as a collective that you can necessarily put and pinpoint?
Yeah, it's hard to talk about like the cannabis industry as like a monolithic thing because state to state it's quite different. But if I were to just make a general, and oh man, people would really need to watch like the full hour-long video to kind of contextualize everything that I'm saying. But before the achiever stage, there's something called the power stage. And in the power stage, it's not about morality or ethics. It's just about who has the most power. And if you have more power over someone, you could exert it. Right. So I would say uh, uh, that the cannabis industry is now in one of these contractive phases where power matters. The people that have the most kind of what's the best word? The biggest treasure chest of money,
Capital.
yeah, capital. They could afford to make a lot more mistakes
Yeah.
than people that don't. And the people that maybe social equity is like a good place to give this example is, I know of so many social equity companies that built a great brand, maybe didn't get quite the support that they needed. The brand was struggling, and then somehow their social equity sponsor becomes 51% owner of that brand, and then kind of take over the brand, scale it up even further, and then the brand is majority theirs now. So that would probably be the easiest example that I could give of like why I perceive it that way. But then on the other side of the spectrum, there's people like you guys that got into this for the plant, for the patients, for the destigmatization of this plant, and to normalize plant medicines in general. And so I believe like there's a certain percentage of the industry that's operating in that power stage, and then there's a certain percentage that's operating in that more inner reflection stage. But these two groups are working together. And the really important thing about spiral dynamics, and why I always tell, like, if you're in a relationship with someone, if both of you learn it, and you learn these different stages, you start realizing that we're all speaking English. We all understand these words, but depending on what your core values are, what you prioritize in life, those words are going to have like different significance and different weight behind them. And most of or I wouldn't say most, I would say almost all conflict, whether it's on the geopolitical level or on the micro level of between just a couple fighting, comes down to lack of communication. And even when you're communicating, it's not high level communication because one guy might be speaking from level 7, one guy might be speaking from level 4. And if anyone has children, it's the easiest thing to realize. It's like when you tell your children your lived wisdom and they don't have that lived wisdom, it makes no sense to them. And that's the exact same thing with spiral dynamics, except, like, I don't want to sound cocky, but when I see the billionaires or when I see the biggest people in our industry, like I don't automatically respect them. I don't automatically give them credit for where they are. I just see them as another person at a certain stage, usually stuck in stage 5, that is slamming his dick in the door, wondering why, like, with all this success, they still need more and more. And when you start having like this elevated view, just like when my children mess up, like, I'm not going all crazy. I'm just like, I realize they're at that age. So when I see politicians, when I see people in our industry do stupid shit, of course, like the human in me is like, that's fucking dumb. But the spiritually connected version of me knows, like, yeah, they're just like a little child. Their consciousness hasn't fully expanded and they're doing stuff that people at that stage do. Whether it's Biden, Trump, Elon, yeah, like they're all doing stuff that people do at those stages of consciousness. And for me, like whatever they do, it's like 100% predictable. It's like, and what I could tell you is most politicians are in that power stage, like they have donors that they have to serve. And outside of that, they're serving themselves. So when they make all these decisions, if people understand like this psychological mental model, like when I see decisions that are dumb, it does upset me, but it never surprises me. It never
Yeah.
surprises me because it's predictable based on their level of consciousness, what's important to them.
I thought the victim mindset, and what was the opposite of the victim mindset?
Creator.
Yeah, the creator, and that concept there, and how you apply that maybe to the achiever, and just the self versus the outward is that one definitely resonates for different levels of the spiral dynamics that I've personally been at and elevated through, or maybe go between sometimes. One thing I'm curious about, for you personally, how has cannabis supported or impacted your shifts, through the different stages or levels or colors or numbers of the spiral dynamics spectrum?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, MP is younger than us, but you and I, Kref, we grew up in the 80s. We were told that weed is a gateway drug, to like heroin and all of that. And I do agree, weed is a gateway drug, but it's a gateway to expanded consciousness. And I would say that cannabis was very, very important to my spiritual development. It allowed me to start seeing things from different perspectives. It allowed me to empathize more. It made me more in touch with my feelings. And these were all things that I think I had some awareness of when I was younger. But when I would consume cannabis, it would really, really amplify. And oh yeah, here we go. Here we go. This is perfect. So here's one of like my journals that I keep. How high am I? It's a journal for your ideas. And I used to think like in these altered states with cannabis, like I would think like, oh man, I have all these great ideas. But then when I would sober up, I would be like, oh, that was just like, whatever I thought about on weed. And once I started doing stronger entheogens and psychedelics, I had that same thing, which was like, oh yeah, like I imagined myself like with like Buddha or Ganesha, and it seems so real at the moment. But once I returned back to this normal state, like I didn't experience it anymore. So I always thought like there was a certain state of consciousness with the plants, and then there's a certain state of consciousness that I could access when I was just in my beta brainwave sober state of mind. And what I ended up realizing was the really interesting thing was my spiritual expansion actually accelerated the day that I smoked weed. I remember this was July 16th of 2023. I smoked weed and went to go meditate, and immediately I heard a voice that said, "This is the last time you're going to smoke weed." And then didn't smoke weed for 9 months, and didn't smoke weed for 9 months. And it was saying that like I love to smoke weed to kind of get relaxed and then to tap into source, but I was using weed as like a crutch. And then so fast forward 9 months later, I sit down in a meditation, and it's like, oh yeah, very good, Sabo, you could start smoking weed again. And I was like, awesome. And they're like, yeah, but my higher self said, but this time when you smoke weed, it's not for spiritual expansion. Just go smoke weed, eat some fried chicken, go have sex with your wife. Just go enjoy it, enjoy it recreationally. You don't have to always use it like as this spiritual catalyst. So it's just kind of interesting, like how the relationship with the plant can shift and change like that. And ultimately I've learned to trust that little voice in your head. And so sometimes people will ask me, well, how do you know if the little voice is leading you in the right way or the wrong way? And I always tell people, well, if that little voice is like telling you you got to quit your job, but you feel fearful and you feel anxious, well, that's not your higher self. That's just like the ego mind fucking with you. But if whatever you're thinking about brings you more joy, you feel expansive, you feel in alignment, then that's your higher self speaking with you. And your higher self is always talking to you. Whether or not you listen to it, that's up to you.
So that's still with intention, though. both of those that you described versus escapism, whether that was the time that you were receiving the message to reduce or eliminate your consumption, and then again 9 months later when they said, "Yo, Sabo, go smoke some weed and munchies, and then and have some special time with your wife." Both of those times were with intentions, and it wasn't just, "Hey, go smoke weed," and
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah, and my pattern had been well, for the vast majority of my life was been, as a wake and baker, and then
Mm,
probably ever since in my 40s, so for the last 8 years, it was more like, after work type of thing. Then I just started realizing, like, at 5 PM, I would always wanna take, like, a huge dab, even when I didn't wanna take a huge dab, So, I think the word that you said was intentional. So,
yes.
even though, like, I was still responsible, paying the bills, doing well at work, it wasn't intentional. It was just, like, it was programmed into my operating system.
Habitual at that point,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
an addiction and it's a habit, and not necessarily the healthiest, but we all have our things, our vices. Um, with that, and you're talking about, I don't remember the word you used, but is it a different level of subconscious that you're kind of describing, or is it something else, as far as what you're talking about there?
Can you rephrase that question?
You were just talking about, kind of how, you were hearing, not hearing, but the message that you were receiving was, either to stop smoking weed, and then you were receiving another message that here's, you can or should start to consume again. Was that coming from what level of consciousness? And because I know you talk about sometimes, like, I think rewiring the subconscious and releasing loops that keep us stuck. Is that something that fits into that, or is that something completely different from that idea there?
Yeah, great question. So, for anyone that's done any doses of psychedelics, you know that when you take the psychedelics, it does shift your consciousness. You do seem to have like access to like knowledge or information that you normally don't have access to. And if you look at like a fMRI of someone on psychedelics, you'll see certain parts of their brain activate, like prefrontal cortex, amygdala. I can't remember which actual parts, but um, I then saw a fMRI of like master meditators, like those monks in Tibet and stuff, and it was like a carbon copy of people that were under heavy doses of psychedelics. And there's like this trope about someone took like 500 mics of LSD, gave it to like a master yogi, and the master yogi took it and like was like, didn't get affected. And the idea was that like they're tapping into what Joe Dispenza would call the quantum field, or what scientists may call theta consciousness. And so, as we're talking right now, the brainwave pattern that is going through our mind are beta brainwaves. When we start like daydreaming, or when our inner world becomes more exciting than the outer world, that's called alpha frequency or alpha state waves. And then when you go one step below that, you get into theta brainwaves. And theta brainwaves are where freestyle rappers are able to just like tap into like the universal portal of words, where athletes are playing in the zone, like where time gets compressed, half a second feels like, eternity for them to get that last 3-point shot out. So, yeah. So, what I'm doing to access this is getting into the theta frequency, which you access through meditation. And, having two kids, I can't do psychedelics all the time, but I could always sit down and meditate and access that. So, that's become something that I can do. But what I've been really practicing now is, instead of accessing theta consciousness during meditation, how can I bring theta consciousness into every waking moment of my life? Which is that interview. I think Nikki was also talking about that in that interview that I did with Nikki, which is a different podcast. But it really is about like meditating is great to awaken people. All right. So we awaken people that like stage 5, this achiever stage, it's just barely halfway through like this whole journey of consciousness. And so most people, that are awakened, like some people get like tired of these woke people, but awakening is just step 1. Awakening to the nature that we are all source reality, or we are all part of source consciousness in a unified consciousness, is just step 1. Step 2 is is what I like to call liberation. So step 1 is you wake up that we are in a matrix. And then step 2 is like, well, if we are in a matrix, like, what do we do? Well, it's to liberate ourselves. It's to liberate ourselves from all of these societal rules that taught us to limit ourselves, and to really understand that we are truly infinite eternal beings. And for me, I know that like a lot of people listening, like if you're into this stuff, you're like, oh yeah, yeah, what Sabo's saying is cool. And if you're not into this stuff, it's like, man,
40%
this
just
guy is
turns
like
it
the biggest
off.
bullshitter in the world. But everything that I talk about, what I like to tell people is like, all of this is from lived experience. It's not from listening to a Joe Rogan podcast with like Graham Hancock or something. It's from, I can speak with this level of confidence because I know it's from my lived experience. Now, will everyone have this same lived experience meditating? I don't know, but I know I did. And I know that I've taught 188 people how to access these higher frequential realms. And to me, that is a statistically relevant enough number to believe, like, or not just believe, but to know that everyone, if you put in the time to exercise these inner sense organs or inner sense muscles, you could absolutely connect with the theta consciousness and tap into the quantum field of the universe.
Yeah, so I agree, and that's incredible. Some if you have a, depending on your perspective, experience, exposure to these concepts and ideas, you're gonna look at us, or you and us for talking to you as these guys are fucking wackos, or else they're gonna be like, hey, this shit's really interesting. You mentioned, growing up in the 80s or 90s, and that just made me thinking about the ads. This is your brain on drugs with the smashing of the egg or whatever. And then you start to talk about, okay, psychedelics, or starting with cannabis, and then moving into psychedelics. And is that the rewiring of the brain? Is that a regenerative regeneration of the neuro brainwaves, or whatever scientific words that you call them? Or is it neurotransformative, or is it neurodestructive? What does that look like? Because they kind of showed, hey, this is neurodestructive, it's gonna blow your brains out, versus some of the even cannabinoids that we've talked about, whether that be, I think, the CBG stuff. We were doing some projects on with those intranasal things, or even the nebulizer, that were some neuro regenerative formulations. And is that what you see with psychedelics as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think maybe what will help people kind of understand this more on like a 3D physical space-time level is that we all have neural pathways. The neural pathways are made up of cell bodies, axons, and dendrites. And every time we think about something, the neural pathways get thicker and thicker and thicker. And humans are bioelectrical beings. Electricity always follows the path of least resistance. So if you're having the same fearful thoughts, the same judgmental thoughts, like those neural pathways are getting significantly thicker than the more healthy neural pathways. And so because of all of that, sorry, my wife just like texted me like 10 times, so let me just mute this so I'm not getting all these rings in my ear. Sorry about that.
We're
You're
good.
good.
My shit's
Okay.
blowing up. Hey, time out, because my dog has been trying to get in for like 15. So while we're pausing this, I'm just gonna let him in, because he's like, I don't know why, but I'm gonna let him in and put him in a room. So give me
Okay.
two
Yeah,
seconds.
Perfect. Perfect.
the power of editing.
No one knew.
No one knew.
Um, so you met Kref on LinkedIn as well?
Yep.
Are you guys in a similar geography or
About 2 hours away. I'm on the west side of Michigan. He's on the east side.
Oh,
So
awesome, awesome. And
we're
then
Mich-
how long have you guys known each other?
This has been going on for about 3, 4 months now, I want to say. So just a project where I was like starting a podcast, and Kref was like, let's do it. and I think we have a pretty good level of energy where we can bounce off each other. So here we are.
Oh man, that's really awesome. I had no idea. It was just like kind of like a new bromance. I thought
Yeah, here
maybe you
we
guys
are.
knew each other for like a year or two.
The power of
Oh,
the
that's
internet,
awesome.
man, just brings it all together. So boom, we're back. I don't know like how.
Oh man, okay, neural pathways, cell bodies, axons, dendrites. Okay, yeah. So um so we were talking about how it takes time for or that we are bioelectrical beings and electricity follows the path of least resistance. So if you're always thinking paranoid or negative thoughts, those will be the ones that are most easily traveled for your consciousness. And so they say that we have anywhere between 70 to 80,000 thoughts per day. 90% of what we think about today is the same as yesterday. And roughly 80% of our aggregate thoughts are negative thoughts. And that's actually a feature, not a bug, because if you think about our ancestors having to survive, the people that were paranoid, that they were probably higher likelihood of survival than like an optimist like me that's like just roasting like marshmallows over the campfire while the wolves are coming over the mountain.
Yeah.
So
Collecting your chicken eggs.
yeah. So when I say that, there is an advantage for being paranoid all the time. But now we live in a society where the vast majority of us aren't worried about our next meal or worried about shelter, yet we still have that same wiring that our ancestors had. So yes, through psychedelics, through therapy, through meditation, you start rewiring those neural pathways. So you prune back the ones that don't serve you, and then you start cultivating the ones that do. And so, what I always like to really emphasize to people is knowledge is, I don't want to say worthless, but it's almost worthless. It's like once I told you this, like you're not going to be able to rewire like your neural pathways instantly. You're going to be like, oh man, Sabo just said I shouldn't be triggered. This is just like one of those neural pathways. Why do I keep getting triggered? Well, it's because electricity just keeps going down that path. You have to give it time. And for me, like my wife would always say, if there was like a camera in the car, no one would think you're a meditation coach because I would just get so triggered by people cutting me off. And so it took me about like 30 more times of getting triggered where I had like the neural pathway would activate, and then I would be like just about to yell at someone and then catch myself. And then the next time it happened, you know, instead of like about to yell them, it would just be like, oh man, that guy's annoying. And then I would catch myself. And then after like 30 times, it was just like, oh man, maybe that guy has to get to the hospital and see his kid delivered, and not get triggered at all. And so it's kind of like this crawl, walk, run process. And that's why I said like knowledge of something isn't that valuable until you have experience with that knowledge. And then the knowledge plus experience starts becoming lived wisdom. And to me, that's the most important thing to have, because right now with AI, anyone can fake expertise, but any one of these creators or people that are faking expertise online, all you need to do is get them on a podcast. You ask them like a couple of questions a little bit deeper than the surface level, and you start seeing like their expertise starts falling apart pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that when you talked about the example you just used around getting triggered and 30 times through driving, and the step to 1 to 2 to 3, and then you mentioned the example of, okay, well, maybe they had to get to the hospital or whatever it was. Is that moving from like the individual to the collective? Because a lot of what we've been talking about is around the individual, but we are also part of something uh, much bigger. Is that would that apply there, or is that something different?
Yeah. Can you just ask that question one more time? I think I know the answer, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding the question more clearly.
I'm just trying to pull back from the individual, which I feel like we've talked about a little bit, to the collective, and just uh, hone in a little bit more around what unification may look like a little bit, if that might be at all relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's this, I don't even know, like, if I want to call it a concept, but there is a principle in quantum physics called quantum entanglement, where things that are in contact with each other are entangled. And what they mean by that is, they had separated like an electron and then moved these electrons 14 miles apart, and then they were adjusting the spin on the electrons. And what they ended up finding out was that, like, when they would rotate one of the electrons clockwise, the other electron would rotate clockwise. And they had atomic clocks on these electrons and realized there was no latency. Even at the speed of light, 14 miles will take, I don't know, like a, a tenth of a millisecond. I'm just making up a number, but they found that like these things there was no latency between this. And so if we go back to 14 billion years ago during the Big Bang, when all matter was compressed into like the head of a pin needle, all the matter was connected before the Big Bang. And this is to talk about, like, yeah, we are all connected beings. Like, we have individuated meat bodies that make us feel separate, but we are all connected in some way. There are times when you text me or I text you and we're like, oh shit, we're just thinking about each other or something. That's a good form of quantum entanglement. Or if someone's like staring at you while you're sleeping and then you kind of like just wake up and you kind of have like this sense, right? Like, there's these things outside of our five senses that are coming into play. But when it comes to the collective consciousness, and this is why I think it's so important to talk about this connection between all people, because we are in a very divisive time in our society. I used to live in San Francisco. I live in a rural area, so the exact opposite of politics. But I could say, like, what I could tell you is the the general theme of we're protecting America and the other side is ruining America is like kind of like the baseline, like essence that everyone is so concerned about. So for me, it's like really easy for me to see, like, oh yeah, you guys are actually the same people, but you guys just had different upbringings. And
Yes.
and so when it comes to the collective, it's I think I think if you're a conservative and you could see that you are Biden, and if you're a liberal and you could see that you are actually Trump, you stop dehumanizing the other side. And when you dehumanize the other side, it's easy to throw them into jail, to torture them, because you don't see them as a human anymore. But if you see your enemy as just another reflection of yourself, then more patience, more compassion, more connectiveness. And that's what I believe. Like, the plant really helps. I typically tell people, whether you're red or blue, most people like green. So let's smoke some weed, and let's build bridges versus build more barriers between people, because the barriers, whether they're country lines, state lines, city lines, it's all made up stuff. And there's something about like psychedelics that really kind of makes you go, yeah, this was all made up stuff. And the people that made up this stuff, they're not smarter than me. As a matter of fact, when I really watch them, I'm probably smarter than most of these people. And this kind of goes back to like why I don't really have like admiration, and I might even say respect, for like really successful politicians and or owner operators and or CEOs, is because like I've coached enough people that are like everyone I coached, I would say is like a one percenter. And what I could tell you is their passion and their ideas for grandiosity of like what they're going to accomplish is 100% correlated to their unhealed trauma.
Is this a light and dark thing? And does everybody see themselves or their side as light? And is light always good and dark always bad? Is one thing that I just kind of was wondering. And the other one is, you just kind of drilled down into Big Bang Theory and science, but I know you're very connected spiritually and to a greater being as well. So what's the interplay there? So I know there was a couple of things. Um, I'm wondering, your perspectives on those.
Yeah. So I'll take the second question first, which is, like, in the past, before the scientific process, like we had to come up with different explanations for like rain, typhoons, tornadoes. Usually they came in the form of some stories, Noah's Ark, Cain and Abel, things of that nature, because that is what the level of consciousness of society could accept. Now that we have science, now that we have logic and rationality, I could start using quantum physics to explain some of these metaphysical concepts. So I wouldn't say it's really switching. And one of my favorite quotes is in the first Thor movie. Natalie Portman asks Chris Hemsworth, like, is where you're from like a land of magic? And then Chris Hemsworth just says, no, it's just what you call magic is just, or what you call magic is just technology you haven't discovered. So to me, technology, science, spirituality, it's all one and the same, just trying to better understand, what is the nature of reality? Why are we here? And some want to use a scientific process, some want to use a spiritual process. To me, they're just trying to explain the same thing through different languages. And ultimately, for me, I'm a very practical guy. It's like, I know some people that get into spirituality and they're like, dude, I'm a starseed from another planet. Planet Earth is too dense. Like this frequency, this is why I'm not successful here. Then I would say, yeah, spirituality is not benefiting you because there's only the here and now, And if spirituality helps you become more present, makes you more happy, then I would say, yeah, that's good for you. It's utilitarianly useful for you. And so I'm not attached to any of these ideologies. The only thing I'm attached to is that people feel connected to other people. People can do things where they don't feel like they're being judged, and people could live like their best life. And to me, that's kind of like the crux of it, because we spend so much time grinding, hustling, sacrificing our time, our health, our relationship for goals that, give us like a little dopamine rush. But some people wait weeks, months, years, decades between these dopamine hits when it's completely accessible every single day at every single moment.
I love that, man. The little things. Well, we've hit on a few big topics, and I know, God, we could go on forever, but I did want to hit into kind of a regular cadence here. I know we hit on some big one, which was spiral dynamics, some mindset engineering and rewiring the subconscious, some unification, intertwined all of this stuff with weed and the cannabis industry a little bit, and some psychedelic conversation. So it's been fascinating. I want to hop into what we do every show with our guests, which is our lightning round. So I'm just gonna give you just rapid fire some questions, and just like boom, no thought, just a unconscious, you're in the zone. LeBron just doesn't even know what's going on. Kobe, just shoot the shit. Okay. So,
Yep. State of no mind. Let's go.
yes, ready? Here we go. What's one thing you believe about consciousness that most people would think is wild?
Wow. That most people, I would say almost the vast majority of stuff we spoke about, a lot of people would think is wild. But I would say the one thing that I believe that a lot of people I think would roll their eyes is that we have been working with extraterrestrials for millennia in order to upgrade our genetics to be able to handle the energetic flow that all of mankind is going to experience within the next decade.
Sheesh. Whew. With the hot, with the heat, Sabo. Okay. I love this. All right. Next.
And real quick, actually, let me just elaborate on that. I know this is a lightning round,
Oh,
but
you're
this
good.
goes this goes back to the frequencies and why it's so important to be able to, you hear spiritual people talk about like, let's raise your frequency all the time.
Yeah.
And I tend to think like they just, when I say, what do you mean frequency? They typically don't have like a satisfying answer to me. So the answer that I got when I meditated it was, think about your brain as a radio tuner, and a radio tuner has access to any of the frequencies in that area. If you could broaden your frequency band, you could access more radio stations. So psychedelics, meditation, inner work all widens your frequency band. So when people say they can spot extraterrestrial like UAPs, it's not that they just happen to see one flying by that day. It's that no, they are in an enhanced state. There are hundreds and thousands of spacecrafts in the air every day. It's just that people aren't in a higher frequency band to even perceive them. And so aliens coming is not a thing. They've just always been here. It's about us raising the collective consciousness so that we could perceive it. And the best example that I could give is that if you watch a Disney movie with a young child, they'll be laughing at all like the little kid jokes. And then there's a bunch of like adult sexual innuendo that they never pick up on. And it's like, was that there? Was that not there before? Or was it always there? No, it's always there. Everything, everywhere, all at once. Everything that has ever happened, everything that will ever happen, all happening simultaneously across infinite parallel realities. And when you could open up the aperture of your frequency band, then you have access to all of those.
Yep. Man, I love that you were able to dive deeper there, even though this is rapid fire, but that was good. Um, okay, next, your go-to daily practice right now.
I would say I like to do a combination of Sufi breathing, which is 2 breaths in, 1 breath out, combined with breath of fire, which is rapid exhales through the nose like this. And then I'll alternate 30 breaths in, 60 breaths out. Do that for about 90 minutes, and you will have a DMT release.
Cannabis ritual you swear by.
Cannabis ritual that I swear by. What I like to do is I like to, whether it's a concentrate, whether it's a flower, whether it's a vape, what I do is I grab it, I hold it to my heart, I send an intention of gratitude to the plant. And then before I inhale it, I just say, whatever is going in me, I want it to be for my highest good. Whether it's indica, sativa, whatever terpenes, I feel like that process, it transcends cannabinoid profiles, terpene profiles, flavonoid profiles, and allows your body to receive whatever combination is best for your body at that moment.
Oh, and what is next for Sabo Shen? What's coming through?
I would say what's next for Sabo Shen if I stick it to the cannabis context, is figuring out how to, number one, deal with the recyclability issues of all-in-ones. Number two is how can we have like a Puffco Peak like experience on the go, but with the convenience of a vape pen. So one of the things that I'm working on right now is here is the little glass repository for the concentrate. Then you put it into this little mouthpiece, and then you drop the mouthpiece into a little battery, and then you could
Interesting.
take portable rips. And so there's been companies that have made, kind of like these portable dab rigs, like all in ones. But I don't know. There's something about throwing away like batteries and printed circuit boards that just doesn't make me feel in alignment with the universe. So trying to come up with a more sustainable version that has a really high user experience so that you could have like fast food convenience with homemade meal quality for your cannabis consumption experience.
Sabo, this is fire. You've given us a map, a mirror, and a reminder to come back to presence, to use the plant as a portal, not an escape, and to keep rising up the spiral. So, for anyone resonating with what they just heard, where should they go to learn more, connect deeper, or start the inner work?
Yeah, on LinkedIn, it's Sabo Shen, just my first name, last name. On YouTube, I have a meditation channel called Meditation, but meditation is spelled Meditashen. So just my last name instead of Tion. And my email is sabo@saboknows. And saboknows.com is my website where you could find a whole bunch of information. And if you want to see all the different hardware that I've created, that's at formvape.com.
Dope. So we say it every time, but this one really hits different from the roots to the crown, from the weeds to the clouds. This is the work. Stay tuned in, stay tapped in, and most of all, uh, stay lit with love. So from the weeds to the clouds,
Peace
We
out.
out.